This
Maritime
conference
policy
will now be
discussion
recorded.
and joining us for the legislative affairs discussion. I think the maritime policy discussion was really, really valuable to a lot of folks. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of lead that one.
Yeah, Bob.
Hey, Don, welcome. Good to have you here with us.
Hey, Luke, good to see you today, too. Everybody else.
All right, Don.
Hey, good to see you again, Adam.
Chris Schutzenberger is joining us. Welcome, sir. Good to have you here.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I like your background. You've got all the flags up there and everything, and then the bookcase. Man,
Thanks. Yeah.
I've got just nothing here. I just have a blank. It looks like I'm in a doctor's office. I've got nothing back here. I got to work on it. So, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slideshow. And you're already familiar with the slides that you have for John Kaskin. I will just let him kind of do what he wants to do.
Sure.
We'll give folks a few more minutes to join us. Hopefully, we'll get some more people. But you know, it's almost 4th of July. Who knows what's going on? People are in barbecue mode now, so I'm not sure how many folks are going to show up today. Hey, Julie, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Looks like John Kaskin is joining us now. Hey, John, how are you?
Okay, let's see. My mic is on, fine.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we can hear you. John, I was just mentioning to some of the other folks, we'll give people just a couple more minutes to join in. If we're slow today, we don't have a lot of folks, then we'll just dive right into it because we're recording this, and that way folks can check in later if they want. Most important thing is just to give yourself and Scott Sund some time to go over, the things that you wanted to discuss, and then I'm going to, make a few comments as well. But anyway, it'll be recorded if we don't have a big audience today.
Roger.
Let me put myself on mute so you don't hear all my typing.
I thought that was Scott, because I know Scott's always working on something. That's you, Sink? What are you working on over there?
I've been gone all day, so I'm trying to catch up on the 476 emails I got in my queue.
Okay, yeah, I don't blame you at all. Good luck with that.
I'm sure 30 of them are from you.
Yes, at least 30. Hey, Tim, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Or afternoon, rather.
Looks like we have Ron Brooks joining us as well. Jim Semerad joining us also. Give folks just another moment and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, Ed Krepage is joining us. Ed, welcome. And I believe Doug Deneni will be joining us at some point soon here because he's going to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming events that we should all be aware of in terms of the legislative calendar. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started if everyone is ready. Let me just open up this slideshow and we'll go ahead and begin. So as you can see, there's just a couple things we want to go over today. Again, maybe we can make this a little bit of a shorter training session, might not go the full hour. I'll make a few remarks about particularly the House Armed Services Committee draft of their defense funding bill and some of the things that they've included. Scott Sund will tell you a little bit about what this means for the Navy, some of the priorities that got through into this markup, some of the things that we were pushing for, and maybe some of the things that we're still concerned about. John Kaskin will talk a little bit about the Marine Corps, some things that are going on there. In terms of the Coast Guard, I'll talk a little bit about what we're hearing. Now this month, there's going to be some work done on the Coast Guard reauthorization language. So we're not going to know everything until the end of this month, but there are a few things that we're hearing, so we'll talk to you a little bit about that. And then, of course, John Kaskin will talk to you a little bit about what's going on with the Merchant Marine. There's actually a few developments there that are very positive, and he'll give us an idea of what that's about. And then again, Doug Deneni can tell you a little bit about where we're going in the next couple weeks, in the next month or so, in terms of what's happening on Capitol Hill. So first, let me tell you just a little bit about what came out of the House Armed Services Committee. So their top line for their defense bill is $840 billion, pretty healthy increase over the president's budget. This includes a 4.6% pay raise for service members. This is the largest pay raise in recent memory, at least in the last 2 decades, for service members, which is pretty significant. Now that might have something to do with the fact that we're seeing a lot about recruitment issues. So maybe this is meant to entice some more folks to join up. This particular defense spending bill includes funding for the construction of 8 new Battle Force ships. I'll let Scott talk a little bit more about that. Also, it directs, at least the House version, directs MARAD, the Maritime Administration, to design and build 10 new ships in U.S. shipyards. I'll let John Kaskin go into more detail on that. And then one of the big things that all of you remember from the Hill Surge is the decommissioning battle. The Navy basically said, hey, we're ready to decommission like 24 ships, 9 littoral combat ships. And a lot of folks said, wait a minute, these LCSs have only been out for a few years. How are you possibly going to decommission them already? So the latest that we've seen is that it looks like Congress is trying to salvage 5 of those ships to keep them from being decommissioned, the LCS ships, that is. But that discussion is still ongoing, so we won't know until the Senate and the House kind of meet in conference to get their final version of the National Defense Authorization Act. Then we'll get a better idea of what's going to happen with those ships. Now, with that being said, just giving you a little bit of kind of an introduction, I will hand things over to Scott Sund. Scott, just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide, but I'll let you go ahead and get started here.
Okay, no problem. Good afternoon, everyone. Basically, this is my all and everything slide. It kind of gives you an overview of what we're dealing with, what the Navy is dealing with, and the challenges that they have ahead as they look forward to the next year and also down the FIDIP also. Up there at the top, the new National Defense Strategy is out, and it's not all that different than we have in the past. Basically deters strategic attacks to defend the homeland, that kind of stuff. In the 23 president's budget, the submit was for $230.8 billion for the Navy. It was up $9.1 billion from fiscal year 22. However, because of all the inflation we've had because of COVID and everything, that basically was washed away. In fact, it's a negative increase here when you look at it objectively. However, right now the Navy has 285 deployable battle force ships. For fiscal year 22, the budget was $26.7 billion in the shipbuilding budget. In 23, it's $27.9 billion. And of course, you can tell right away that it's not very high. In 22, they contracted, or they decided to build 13 ships. And for 23, it's 9 ships, but actually 8 ships, as Luke said. One of the ships in LHA was previously authorized by Congress. We are advocating, the Navy League is advocating for at least a $30 billion a year shipbuilding budget to try to just stay in parity and stay up. And I'll give you a little bit more information here as you go on. The decommissioning of 24 ships is a critical issue, and it is, as Luke said, being bandied about between the House and the Senate and on various committees and stuff, and that's still up in the air. But I'll give you a little bit more on that one also. Down at the bottom on the right-hand side, you have the key Navy budget messages. You can see right there, it doesn't say grow the fleet. That's not the #1 priority. It's get that Columbia-class SSBN built. Now, looking in the main portion of this slide here, you can see who our threat is, and this is projected for 2025. The bottom line is this threat is growing, it's real, and there's no way for the U.S. to compete on numbers alone on this particular area. Also, you can tell it's a huge anti-access area denial problem, just the sheer numbers alone, but also the capability of these ships. And next slide, Luke. If you haven't seen or heard recently about last week or week before last, the Chinese just launched their 3rd CVN. It is a nuclear aircraft carrier. And one of the things you'll notice with it, it's up in the left-hand corner there, it doesn't look like the other two. The other two are ski jumps. This one, if you actually match it up, and then you can find some slides where it matches up with the new Ford class SS or CVN, it's almost identical to it in size. The only difference here is you can see they have 3 catapults, which is different from the ski lift, and their catapults are EMALs. They're electromagnetic ones. Geez, where did they get that idea? So they have very capable ships out here. Another kind of note here to note, if you look up what are the top 5 most powerful cruisers and destroyers in the world, the top one, believe it or not, is the DDG 1000 Zumwalt, which you have 3, but which is still an experimental type of ship and probably will never do very much fleet steaming before they figure out how to decom it. They were $4.2 billion a piece. They had 88 missiles that are located in VLS launchers on the sides of the ship, around the sides of the ship. But the next one is actually the Kirov, which is an old 1980s cruiser. That one had 352 missiles on it. It's still around, but it's in pretty bad material condition, so it's not really a player. The 3rd most powerful ship is the Chinese Type 055 destroyer. It's not really a destroyer, it's a cruiser. It's got 112 VLS launchers, plus a 24-cell SAM missile launcher. And this is a big ship, and it's the 3rd most powerful ship in the world. From a cruiser destroyer perspective. The 4th one is considered the Tycho class, CG-47 class US ship, but we want to decom all of those. And on the chopping block of those 24 ships was 5 of the remaining cruisers, and to get rid of all of those. Now, put that in perspective. The cruisers have 122 cells that launch missiles. When you time this by 5, that's 610 missiles. When you time the 6 existing brand new Type 55 Chinese Navy cruisers, destroyers.
I hope that's not a storm warning. I've got to drive into the city later, so.
Looks like somebody's train or something.
Oh, geez,
anyway,
okay.
The Type 55, you're talking about 672 missiles versus we're going to lose 610 missile tubes. And that's not going to be made up. We're never going to hardly ever make that up when you look at it. So that's a big deal. And that's something we have to think about. Last slide for me. Somebody's got their mic on. It sounds like washing water or something. Swirling around. Okay. This is the latest 30-year shipbuilding plan the Navy has put out. You notice that they did not decide to give you one single plan. They've given you 3 plans. But when you look into it a little bit closer here, and you look at the current FIDIP, which is 23 to 27, which is the boxes to the left, and you look to the far right of fiscal year 27, you see those numbers: 10, 86, 32, 48, 13, 280 ships. Now look to the next grouping there, what they're calling transition. That's the next FIDIP out to fiscal year 32. And notice down at the bottom in the total area, 298 ships, 297 ships, 299 ships. Really not very much change. When you look at the top 5 kind of war-fighting ships, they're almost exactly the same. 11, 80 or 81, 31 small combatants, 50 attack submarines, 11 ballistic missile submarines. The amphibious ships get to 31 finally. If you're lucky and you get to alternative 3, you go to 33. But things are not going to change out to 32. So what they're talking about is a fairly flat shipbuilding plan out to at least 2032. We got 285 ships. You add 298 or 299, however you want to play it, and you're only talking about another 15 ships or so over the next how many years. And this is really a shame because the Chinese are not stopping their building program. It's not going to stop. So what we do here with our advocacy, and just $30 billion a year is probably not enough. And I'll leave that to Sink if you want to add any words on the Navy side of things, and John will take up, I know, on any of the legislative side of issues or the shipbuilding. That's all I have. Thanks.
Hey, so thanks, Scott. I'll only be in for a little bit because I got another meeting that starts in 15 minutes. But number one, that slide you showed, that single slide that shows everything, I used that at our convention, and I told the crowd there, I hope this scares the living crap out of you, because it certainly should. And this is the bottom line up front of how far behind we are getting as a maritime nation. So thank you for putting that together. Number 2, in terms of the shipbuilding shenanigans that we're going through, this is one that, we're still trying to sort out in our own head. I mean, I get it. Lethality is important, capability is important, and capacity ends up taking a hit, because if you just build 355 ships, but you can't man them, you can't arm them, who cares? And we've been in a hollow force before. If you recall, Scott, I know you recall, I know I recall it from days gone by. We shouldn't be going back there. So what's the answer? The answer is to get a budget that actually reflects the situation that our nation is facing. And that is one where space, where cyber, and where maritime should be taking the priority in terms of the funds that that we are, as American taxpayers, are applying to our defense. The other question we have to ask ourselves, I know we've had this argument back and forth, is, hey, is it really still a time when the big carrier makes sense? And how much money should we be spending? So there's lots of issues and questions, that the Navy is wrestling with, that we wrestle with in the Navy League. But your presentation, I think, was more than helpful and useful in the convention. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. The last thing I'll say is something I heard from Rod Whitman, who's on the House Armed Services Committee, the HASC, and he made a comment in talking about the shipbuilding budget, and he said, "Out years are when all dreams come true." So when you see past 32 and you go out to 2052, those are all dreams, and that's the way you should look at that.
The out years are like Lake Wobegon, where all the men are good looking, all the women are handsome, and all the children are above average. That's Lake Wobegon.
So believe me, Congress and a lot of our advocates up there in Congress, both on the Senate side and the House side, they understand this issue. This is not, it literally isn't rocket science. It's numbers and it's money. And Luke, back to you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Sink, as well, for bringing us up to speed on these important matters. John Kaskin, you might have something you want to add here, but I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide, which is also yours, which is talking a little bit about the Marine Corps. So if you want to talk anything about the Navy, John, we'd be happy to hear your comments, and then also the Marines.
Sure. Thanks, Luke. Just to one clarification on Scott's presentation. As I was talking, I was double checking about that carrier, the Fujian, and apparently she's conventionally powered, but they have already laid the keel for a nuclear powered carrier.
That's correct.
The other thing is that the Senate also made a mark for the National Defense Authorization Act, and it added more money than the House. So that just means that what the House did, which did get close to $30 billion in the shipbuilding budget, which is what we asked, because they added 5 additional ships. The Senate mark you can get a copy of, and you can read all the details. The House, they finished their marking like on Thursday or Friday, and they had like 100 amendments. And I keep checking the website, and they're still apparently trying to reconcile the language. And I haven't seen a final draft of their mark, but they did add 5 additional ships. I think they added an oiler, a destroyer, a frigate, and 2 EPF hospital variants. That's the used to be the Joint High Speed Vessel. That's the high speed catamaran. And so they added 5 vessels. The lot of criticism on that is that the industrial base isn't going to be able to build those ships any faster than if it was appropriated or authorized and appropriated next year. The other problem is that the appropriators have not completed their effort. The initial draft of the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee followed the president's budget levels. And so no matter what gets authorized, unless the appropriators plus up, and they will likely do so, but it means we've got a long time to really figure out that what the bottom line is going to be, because you still have to have reconciliation between the House and the Senate has more money, but they didn't add the same number of ships. So there's a lot more going on here before the dust settles. But there's no question there's going to be more ships than what the Navy asked for. And the inflationary aspects of it, I think the appropriators will help address that. Although the real question is, even with the extra $8 billion, I think the Senate wants to provide more than the House. I mean, even the comptroller told us when he briefed the special topic breakfast folks a couple of weeks ago that the extra cost for fuel next year is $2 billion for the Navy. Well, you got to figure out the Air Force is going to be at least that much, and the other services. So you can figure out just for the fuel bill how much additional money you're going to need because of inflation. And of course, those bills have to be paid this year, as well as there's a concern about, although 4.6% increase in salaries for military is a good thing, but they're suffering 8% inflation this year, and we don't know what it's going to be next year. So there's still going to be pressure on pay and benefits to try to keep people in the Navy. Okay, break. Marine Corps. Well, since I'm not a Marine, a former Marine, although I get along with Marines mostly, I don't have a lot of to say here, other than the Armed Services Committee did not go along with the Navy's projection that Scott showed, but it didn't show the breakout of what were in those amphibious ships between the light amphibious warfare ship and the conventional amphibs, which are the big decks and the LPDs. And the Navy was heading toward going down to 24, 25 conventional amphibs. And they basically were going to buy one more LPD in 2023 and stop building any more. The Commandant has come out with a requirement for 31, which is how he says he needs to get his troops into theater, and where they then would be moved within theater on the light amphibious warfare ship, the Laws. Now, the Navy also postponed the start of that the Laws program by a year because they are having a discussion on how much survivability should be put into the ship. The Marines wanted a ship that would cost $150 million, but if you add survivability into it, it would double the cost. So they're having that discussion, which means it's delaying that program by a year. So there was in the Sea Power and Protection Forces Subcommittee language to prevent the Navy going below 31 amphibs. It's just like they had language a couple of years ago said the Navy's force structure should be 355 ships. So, you know, it's a number. What that means is that when Congress takes a look at Navy's budget submits, they will look at how it meets their number, not what it meets what the Navy says its number is until Congress changes its mind. So in that, as I mentioned before, in that plus up of ships, the 8 ships that the Navy had included one LPD, the LPD 32 in 2023. What Congress did is add like $150 million for a long lead item for LPD 33. So essentially they're putting money so that the LPD 17 Flight 2 program will be able to continue to get to the target number of vessels, which I think is, let's see, it would be 31 minus 12. So I guess that's 19 ships. Will be the long-term objective if I got my arithmetic correct. But so they're going to continue the LPD 17 Flight 2 program until it meets the stated objective that the Commandant wants. For aircraft, they threw in 2 53 CH-53s. That's I think the most expensive helicopter ever built. 2 additional MV-22s and 2 C-130Js tanker variants. So those are all very expensive aircraft that they added to the Marine Corps budget. So those are the major items that I can address in the Marine Corps. With respect to the debate between the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the former retired generals, it appears that Congress is still supporting General Berger's Force Design 23 objectives and not reversing that trajectory. So no matter, although there was a lot of publicity about it, it doesn't seem to have impacted either the authorization or so far the appropriation levels for the Marine Corps. So subject to any questions, I'm finished with the Marines.
Okay, thanks, John. I appreciate that. I'm going to talk very briefly about the Coast Guard, because as I mentioned a moment ago, we're still waiting to see what the language is going to look like as they're working on it this month. I'll mention 2 things very quickly. One is that based on some information that came out recently from some folks on the House Appropriations Committee, in particular, Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard, who's been a very good friend of the Coast Guard, recently received the Commandant Berthoff Award from former Commandant Schultz, one of the last things that he did before departing. She put out information about some of the things that she'd like to see in this bill, some of the things the Appropriations Committee is thinking about, and that included a significant increase in the overall budget of the Coast Guard, over $13 billion. a significant increase in the ONS budget of about $9.75 billion. That's a pretty healthy increase over the last ONS budget, more than 5%, which is what we were asking for. But again, of course, we were asking to take into account inflation. So in terms of real growth, that might still be a little bit below 5%. And then about $186 million investment in shoreside infrastructure. Again, we were asking for about 200 million, but 186 is 6 million more than what the president's budget requested, about $180 million. Now, again, we're continuing to stay on top of this as they are drafting the Coast Guard reauthorization bill, and we'll keep you updated on that. One other thing I wanted to mention very quickly was the possibility that the Build Back Better bill could kind of rise from the grave and make a comeback before the midterms. One of the things that potentially could be included in that bill is some spending priorities for the Coast Guard. We got some requests from a few folks asking us to reach out to some offices about the Coast Guard's need for another polar security cutter, another icebreaker on the Great Lakes, and then about $1 billion worth of infrastructure investment. John Kaskin and myself reached out to Senator Manchin's office, and I think I mentioned this before, but this really shows the value of our Hill Surge. John Kaskin had briefed one of Senator Manchin's staffers, I think it might have been the chief of staff, during the Hill Surge, and they were so impressed that they wanted to know the Navy League's position on these particular spending priorities. And of course, John Kaskin and I reached out and let them know that these were very important to Coast Guard priorities. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. Both of these things still very much underway. So as they move forward, as they progress, we'll let you know kind of how things are moving. But this is just kind of a basic idea of what we're hearing so far in terms of the Coast Guard. Now, with that being said, we'll move on to Merchant Marine. John Kaskin, if you don't mind, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, the president's budget for the Maritime Administration was pretty consistent with what was appropriated the previous year. It went down $300 million because it did not have to include a national security multi-mission vessel. But other than that, it was pretty consistent with what was appropriated last year. Now, the authorizers, the MARAD authorization bill on the Senate has come out, and it's added considerable more money than what was in the president's budget for many programs. But the primary ones that impacts Sealift are the Maritime Security Program, which was fully funded at $318 million, the Tanker Security Program that was fully funded for 10 vessels, which will add 8 tankers because 2 are migrating from MSP to the fleet, and 2 Cable Security Program vessels. So those are the force structure elements of the MARAD budget. The rest of the MARAD budget doesn't really do much for increasing the Merchant Marine, but it does provide funds for the Merchant Marine Academy and for the state academies. And essentially what was requested by the president's budget was supported there. There were additional programs that were plussed up in the authorizers, like the Marine Highway Program, environmental issues, and the Title 11 program. They added $30 million there. But when the rubber hits the road, again, it's the appropriators that really tell you what's going to happen. And I just finished looking at the THUD, which is the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee of the Defense Appropriations Committee, MARC. And it basically follows the president's budget submit, doesn't take into account any of the plus ups that the authorizers have suggested, other than adding $70 million more to the port development program, going from 230 to 300 million. And it moved $4 million out of the environmental program submit. The administration wanted like $10 million for environmental R&D, and they took $4 million and added it to the Marine Highway Program. So just moving a little bit of money around. And so I would expect what you'll see coming out of MARAD would be pretty much what the appropriators have done. They did not add the $30 million for Title 11 that the authorizers do. They have not supported the Title 11 program in the past. However, there's a possibility because of the offshore wind industry building a lot of vessels in U.S. yards, some of them relatively large. There may be some political pressure to put some money in that program because it helps reduce the cost of financing those vessels. So we'll just have to wait and see what's going on. I've got to. Okay. So the other thing that wasn't mentioned but was on Luke's slide is the Armed Services Committee has been very happy with the Navy's performance in recapitalizing the Red Reserve Force. For many years, they've told the Navy that they could buy some used ships, but in addition, they had to do some new construction in U.S. yards for that recapitalization. And every year, the Navy has essentially ignored the new construction element of that requirement. And so what Congress had been doing is saying, well, we'll authorize you 4 ships, used ships, but you got to start a program, new construction program with initial ship delivery by like 2026. And the Navy would come in with its budget submit saying, well, we would have it delivered in maybe 2028 or something like that, push it a few years, always when you're outside of the 5-year program. So after doing this for 3 years in a row, the Navy has only been given permission, I should say, the funding has only been provided by Congress to buy 4 used ships. So this is Navy funding that goes to MARAD. Now MARAD has bought 2 ships that aged out of the Red Reserve Force, out of the Maritime Security Program. So they're 25-year-old ships with probably a limited life, but they were able to buy those at the amount of money that they had, which I think was $30 million each. The next 2 ships, well, I think they have close to $60 million each, but there are no ships available on the market. Because of COVID, every one of the ships that could be bought are making so much money, they're just not available at any price. And so the program is essentially bust for recapitalizing the RF, and MARAD has already taken 5 ships out, and I think the Navy is transferring its reduced operating status ships to MARAD, but they're getting rid of about 5 of their ships in that process. So we've already shrunk the 61 ships that used to be in the reserve fleets down into the low 50s. And we only bought 2 to replace it. And there's no likelihood of getting new ships soon, new used ships soon. So what they have put in the Armed Services Committee language is that for MARAD to start a program to build new ships, and they wanted to be a commercial type of vessel. They're looking at, I would say, ships that would cost about $380 million each. They would have about 150,000 square feet. But they authorized appropriations, but those appropriations are not in the appropriations bill at this particular point in time. So we just have to wait and see, where this money is going to come from if they do start a program for MARAD to execute. So that's an area that's going to be of interest because that's $380 million that has to come from somewhere. Now, I think the thought might have been is that there was about that amount of money that was in the 2022 bill to buy that last national security military mission vessel, and that would leave a hole that could be filled with a ship. But I don't think MARAD's going to have a design or have the ability to execute the program. So I have no idea how that's going to work out. But it just shows you how upset Congress was with the Navy with respect to sea lift. Now, with respect to the proposed language that we had been talking about in our Hill surge, was that we should have an independent third party develop a new maritime transportation strategy. There was language that came out of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee that did not make it into the final mark of the full committee. But the full committee is missing a whole title, a subpart, that it would include MARAD's authorization in it. So have a meeting with the staffer on the Hill next week to discuss what's the way ahead, because it may be that there will be a floor amendment when the NDA goes up before the full House to add that subpart back in. And so the question is, will they incorporate that language in that part? Now, meanwhile, the Senate came up with its own language, which was not similar to ours. It was, instead of an independent third party, they suggested a Federal Finance Research and Development Center do a maritime strategy, not maritime transportation strategy, call it a maritime strategy and report. And it's very similar to what was called for in 2014, where they've never been able to produce such a strategy. I guess I would hope that an FFRDC would do a better job than the administration. So even if there is language, doesn't come out of the House, there will be something that will have to be conferenced between the House and Senate to start looking at what we need to do in the future, because one of the major concerns that we have is that we have no strategy to provide enough sea lift for economic security purposes. We have a contested environment in the Pacific now, in the peacetime as well as in wartime. The Chinese have put pressure on countries like Australia and others that when they don't bid and don't toe their line, for example, when the Australians asked the Chinese, where did COVID come from? The Chinese punished Australia by preventing any of their coal that had been bought from Australia to offload in their ports for about 6 months. And those were all foreign ships, and therefore the Australians couldn't do anything with that coal. They just sat there because the Chinese had the leverage on them. So it shows you the economic power that the Chinese could have in peacetime as well as in wartime. So just like the U.S. Transportation Command finally decided that it needed more tankers under U.S. flag to support a wartime operation, we now are saying that we need an analysis to see how much shipping we need to ensure our economic security, that in a wartime situation, that we can operate the economy if the Chinese put pressure on shipping so that we can't get the materials that we need to operate the industrial base to come into this country during a protracted war. And so that was part of the reason for the study. So we'll see whether that language gets put in, and I think that's enough of my soapbox for now.
Thank you, John. We all certainly appreciate the update. Before I move on to the last topic, let me ask if Doug Deneny is on the line. Doug, are you our mysterious phone caller? I think that might be no. So if Doug Deneny is not on the line with us, let me go ahead and move on to the last slide, and I'll mention one or two things, and then I don't know if John or Scott or anybody else wants to add on as well. So what we have seen is that Congress would like to get the NDAA knocked out before I think the midterms, before the election at the beginning of November. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Obviously, as John Kaskin has pointed out, they're going to go to conference. We'll get an idea of who the conferees are. We'll get an idea also, hopefully, of what things we might need to really push for kind of at the last moment, whether it's that maritime transportation strategy language or anything like that. or decommission ships, whatever the case may be. So we'll be keeping our eyes on those things as well. Just wanted to mention also that we have a shipbuilding caucus event that will be going on with Congressman Courtney and Congressman Whitman at the end of July. We'll have another one in the fall, and then of course we will have our new annual event, which is our Legislative Affairs Forum at the Navy League headquarters building. We do that in December. We had our first annual event last year. We'll do our second one this year, so that's obviously something else that's coming up. And as I mentioned earlier, we will of course keep you updated as we're tracking things that are happening with the Coast Guard authorization bill as well. So those are some of the big things that are coming up. August obviously is the recess. Now we'll still be talking with folks on staff and things of that nature, but things will calm down a little bit in August. And before you know it, we will be gearing up again for our next hill surge. So if you get a little downtime, get a little time to relax, please enjoy it now, because before you know it, it'll be fall and we'll be getting ready for our next hill surge already. Sorry to tell you that, but that's just kind of the way it goes. John Kaskin, Scott, anybody else? Did anybody have anything that you wanted to add in terms of some things that folks should be aware of over the next couple months?
This is Scott Sant. I saw some articles earlier this week, and they're already starting to talk about continuing resolutions. And if you go back to history, the last 15 of 20 fiscal years have ended up in a continuing resolution. And so that's a pretty good chance that we might have one. Also, when they do have a CR, the average length of them is 112 days. So this could push a lot of things out and increase a lot of cost and a lot of issues there like that. But it's not going to be a done deal on the 1st of October, I don't think. Over.
So Scott, unfortunately, I think you make a good point. We always, mention whenever we talk to members of Congress that continuing resolutions tend to cost more money for various projects. It also delays the start of new projects and so on and so forth. But, we're kind of preaching to the choir, even though Congress itself is responsible for passing these continuing resolutions rather than finalizing the budget. Nobody really likes it. It's not exactly something that anybody is eager to do. So unfortunately, we talk to members all the time about this, but it's just kind of the reality of the situation. Thank you for that, Scott. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add?
Just to add to what Scott had to say, Congress has at least marked, the subcommittees have marked all 12, all the appropriation bills. And they're supposed to go to full committee, I think next week or short, because I think when everybody else is in recess, the appropriators are supposed to be working. So there is hope that we're ahead of schedule than what we normally will be, but the real issue is what I highlighted before. They haven't increased the top line allocated to each of the subcommittees. And that's why the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee is still following the president's budget, because they never did a reconciliation bill. They didn't do all these other things. Which is one of the things that was mentioned before with Senator Manchin. Although they called it a Buy Back Better, it was a reconciliation bill that would have been able to increase the overall top line. So that's really what's going to be the long pole in the tent, is when will the administration and of course the Senate controlled Congress decide to bust out of the current top line levels and admit that due to inflation and other reasons, they're going to have to add a whole bunch of money to the 23 budget submit that they sent out just in March. So, you had a budget that comes out in March. Now we're April, May, June, and it's been completely busted. Now somebody has to admit that we have to come up with a new budget top line, and then that means they have to then go back on the subcommittee levels and add the money that they want to add in order to cover inflation and other bills. So whether that's going to be done by the end of October, end of September or not, I think Scott's right. But I'm not as pessimistic that it's going to last as long. But it's a crapshoot. You can throw the dice any way you want, and you'll never know how it comes out, because we still have that election in November that's going to be in play.
Yeah, and Luke, one more thing here. I heard a really good detailed assessment of what's going on over in Ukraine. It's not good, But the things for us, from our perspective here, to take a look at in terms of budgetary issues is that this war is probably going to last for several years. I don't know how many years, but it's not going to be over in the summer, and it's not going to be over in the fall. And worse than that, all that grain that is right now in Odessa is being targeted by the Russians. So basically, if it looks like somebody's trying to get that grain out by other means than the sea, the Russians are going to destroy it all. And so what that means is that all those nations in Africa and the Middle East that need that grain is going to cause a massive famine in those regions, and also which will result in more refugees trying to get out of those countries. And this is going to be a real problem here this summer and this fall. And that's going to cost money to the United States and to our budget. And that could have an impact on the fiscal year 23 budget and going forward also. Over.
So Scott, you're absolutely correct. The ongoing war in Ukraine is a major X factor, and the destabilization that you describe, it's worth mentioning that it's going to go far beyond Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, all these kind of places that are geographically closer to Ukraine. There's so many nations in the world that depend on the grain that comes out of Ukraine. You know, as you just mentioned, places in Africa and also in parts of Asia. The instability that could be created by this food not arriving in these places, you know, it's hard to overstate how significant that could be. So who knows what situation we'll be looking at even just a few months from now. So Scott, I'm glad you mentioned that because that also could change things quite a bit. We don't know what to expect just yet.
Well, the one potential benefit is we've been arguing for a long time that we should increase the Navy and the Air Force budgets and shrink the Army. The Army is losing a lot of their hardware as part of this drawdown, and the Navy, I think, it's just contributing a few Harpoon missiles. And the Marine Corps divested itself of its tanks and a lot of its artillery, and I bet most of it's already gone to Ukraine. So this is going to be, if it's going to be a budgetary negative, it'll be primarily to the Army, and whether they are able to buy back a lot of the artillery and the weapons that's been transferred to, out of the defense drawdown budget. Because the way that works, when they have this defense drawdown authorization, that means they can take anything that's in the current inventory and then send it to Ukraine. That's in addition to appropriations that are been added to buy new stuff. But most of those appropriations is to backfill what was been sent to Ukraine. So I think it's just something to watch, that it may be the Army will be shrinking as part of this process.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I will mention that the House Armed Services Committee markup did include, I think, 4 additional Patriot battalions, or at least a pretty sizable investment in Patriot missile defense. So that seems to be the direction that they really want the Army to focus on, but we'll see. Did anyone else have any comments before we close out today? As I mentioned, today might be a little bit shorter. We just wanted to run through a couple of these things, give everyone an idea of kind of what to expect over the next couple of months. I certainly wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work on the Hill surge. That's obviously the biggest legislative effort that we have throughout the year. So now that that's coming to a close, things will calm down, you know, to some extent. We'll kind of keep you updated on where things are going in the weeks and the months to come. But other than that, John, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Oh, you just mentioned Red Hill. There is language in the House authorization that was in an amendment to have the Department of Defense present a study or a report by February saying how they're going to reconcile the loss of the fuel in Red Hill, and what are the options in the Pacific for the transportation of for fuel. So that was one of the things, one of the slides we had there, is that we wanted Congress to get some clarity on what they were going to do to account for the 250 million gallons that was being drained out of the Red Hill, or is no longer available. So another win for us. I think we had some impact on that particular language as well.
Thank you, John. I think you're right. I can't tell you how many meetings I was in where the member of Congress, wasn't too familiar with the situation over at Red Hill and asked for more information, issue briefs, and some of the other information that we provide. And so, yeah, I think we did make a lot of noise about that, and I think a lot of members took note of it. Jim Semara, did you have a question or comment? Jim, you're muted, just so you know, we can't hear you.
John probably already knows this, but in the Great Lakes area, the shipping season is back in full swing, and it's very strong right now. So, I'm kind of looking everywhere from over Chicago up to Minnesota and then all the way over to New York with the Great Lakes. And the ships are very busy right now. We are seeing some of the 1,000-footers coming into the Great Lakes. And a little bit more, some of the U.S. companies shifted some of their assets over to Canada, but they're still operating in the Great Lakes. But they're pretty full, and they look like they're very busy. I did also have a conversation with Admiral Achenbach up at the Great Lakes Maritime Academy. His staffing is student population is like at capacity right now. So they're trying to crank out a lot of students right now for the maritime industry, and the school is everything is fully opened up right now. Admiral Radomski called me yesterday or this morning, and Admiral Lennon from the Sea Cadets is coming into town, and we got Navy Week coming up in a couple weeks. So, but shipping at least here is pretty strong. Over.
Yeah. I've been watching the statistics. Apparently, we're exporting a lot of grain, a lot more than we have in the past, and that's one of the reasons. And some of the salties are coming in to take out grain. One other item to add with respect to the tankers, which was another item that we had in the Hill surge. The Senate doubled the amount of funding for the tanker security program. We don't know. They didn't double the numbers of tankers, so we're trying to get some clarity on that. I don't know, Sarah, you nodded your head. Did you get some clarity?
There are some companies who own tankers who have been very convincing in telling government agencies that the current authorized funding level is not enough and they won't get any bids. And there's a real desire for this program to be successful. So I think it's a drive to really confirm that they will have the number of bids that they're hoping for. I don't know if you can really tell that until the application's out, which they think will happen before the end of the year. But that's the background on that. Is some companies who want more money per ship have done a very good job of convincing others that in order to get the participation that you need to increase the stipend to make it work, specifically because this program doesn't have a government cargo component, right? Like MSP does. MSP ships who are enrolled in MSP also get first shot at government compelled cargo. And there isn't really that much government compelled tanker activity going on. So they're worried they're not going to have enough, that the program won't succeed. So that's the background for the increased funding on the tankers. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. But my history of when you set a number in the budget, then somehow all that money gets spent, no matter what it really would cost, because people will raise their prices to take account whatever's available. If you keep it low, then they'll try to sharpen their pencil. If you give it high, you want to know what a frigate costs? Well, look at what the appropriators put for it. And if there's a cost overrun later, then they'll come after. If there's an underrun, like there was with the LMSR program, we just help pay for some overruns in some other yards. So it's interesting on how that works. But thank you for the insight.
The bigger the fish bowl, the bigger the fish.
And that, I think, sums up everything perfectly. As usual, Sinclair Harris has given us words to live by. So if anyone doesn't have any more questions or comments, we'll close out here today. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next month. We're going to obviously have our committee meeting again, and we'll talk a little bit more about getting more maybe into the nitty-gritty of some of the different services. You might remember last year we had a really specific training session just on the Navy and just on the Marine Corps and so on and so forth with some experts joining us. We might do that again next month, so we'll keep you updated on that. In the meantime, have a very, very happy, safe 4th of July weekend to you and your families, and take care. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day. Okay.